Hello and welcome everyone to today's session, Initiating Pre-Market Clinical Studies in the EU, What You Need to Know. I'm Sean Smith with MedTech Leading Voice, and I am absolutely thrilled to have with me today Daniela Karrer and Matteo Mosso from Donawa Lifescience. Daniela, did I say it right? Close enough?
More or less, more or less.
More or less. Okay. So the reason I'm so excited today is because we're kicking off our first 5-day email mini course, um, which is the companion course that goes along with this, the 5 biggest mistakes sponsors make and how to avoid them. Each day you'll receive a 2 to 3 minute lesson directly in your inbox. You can unsubscribe at any time. But what I'd like you to do right now is if is to check your email and your spam folder and let me know if you've received, just give me a thumbs up if you received day zero message in your inbox already. Um, and if you haven't, check your junk mail folder or and then right if you don't see it, then right, I didn't get it in the chat. Okay. This session will be recorded and the slides and the replay will be available tomorrow. You get them approximately 24 hours afterwards. I'm going to copy paste in the registration for the 5-day course, which I encourage you to share with your colleagues. Um, why not share it with them? Certificates of attendance will be provided if you'd like one. You should put your name and email address in the chat as you would like it to appear on the certificate of attendance and an email for us to send it to. Give us a day or two to get those done. We do them by hand. For questions, please submit your questions using the QA function as opposed to the chat function. Otherwise, I have to switch back and forth between the two, and that's not fun for me. The last thing is that there will be a short poll about 20 minutes into the call, and it will be followed by a survey afterward. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat for me. And I am going to turn it over to Daniela and Matteo. Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. I'll start sharing my screen. Yeah. Okay. So welcome, everybody. In the first slide, I wanted to show, oops. Yeah. I will start with the story on where real life beats fiction. And I thought of this because that gives an input of why, what are the reasons behind the idea of running this webinar. So this is the story. A while ago, a US company comes to us and asks for help for rescuing a study. The study was a pre-market study, so exactly the key topic of this webinar today. It was planned in two European countries. One of them involved us, high-risk cardiovascular implantable device. When they contacted us, they had activated 11 sites, and all sites had been activated 4 months prior to the contact with us, and they had 0 patients implanted. And to the big surprise was that not only that, which was enough of a problem, they had spent 30% of the budget for monitoring. I wasn't certain whether I should say this because it seems that it's a fake story, but it is not really, it's real life. So we were engaged by them and we reassessed all sites, and eventually 4 of them were closed. A number of motivational visits were done to the sites and enrollment took off. The study was completed and the device was CE marked. Couple of years later. So So this summarizes a bit what we're going to touch on today. What are the issues when initiating a clinical study, pre-market clinical study? Okay, trying to go down, it doesn't switch. Okay, so this is the agenda for today's. We'll touch on the regulatory framework. We have to do it with regulatory, sorry. I've learned this a while ago. We cannot do without it. So just an overview, and then a very important topic, partner selection, selection of investigators and clinical sites. Then we'll talk about the regulatory submission pathway and some budget considerations with mistakes that we often see. And then some notes about what happens, what is peculiar to Europe after the first patient is enrolled, after first patient in. So starting with, sorry, I'm moving my thing. So landing in Europe for the first time, I realized that, so we are a complex continent, languages, 27 countries and 24 languages. It is complex, but we are a quite big market. We have nearly 500 million people living here. So a lot of opportunities, and we have achieved quite a substantial harmonization in regulations for the medtech world. I say substantial is not entire harmonization. So you're gonna see a few times that we've mentioned country specific. So there are indeed some country specific elements to keep in mind, but overall, the framework for clinical studies is harmonized. Actually, I realized after having prepared this slide that this seems to refer, and it does refer actually to foreign companies that maybe have never landed to Europe. But we believe that some of the elements of this webinar will be helpful to companies that are well established in Europe, but they never conducted a pre-market study in Europe according to the current regulatory framework. So certainly there are going to be some tips for them as well. So these are the kind of 6 pillars for pre-market studies. On top, we have the medical device regulation that I've mentioned, MDR from now on. Going clockwise, we have the harmonized standard ISO 14155 that includes the good clinical practices for medical device studies. We'll touch on that later. Then we have a set of regularly updated documents, MDCG, which stands for Medical Device Coordination Group, guidance documents. They can be found online. Then we have the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe. That is the short name is the GDPR. The GDPR, sorry, I don't know if you see the black bar at the bottom of my screen. Do you see that? Because I see it. And it hides. No, okay, perfect, sorry. So GDPR is the regulation that in Europe covers data protection for any kind of processing of personal data. So it's not specific to clinical research, but it does impact clinical research heavily. And then counterclockwise, Helsinki Declaration, I think that most of you, if not all, are familiar with that. Principles of biomedical research, and what I anticipated earlier, some country-specific regulations. Sorry, I'm trying to change slide and it doesn't. Okay. Sorry. Okay, this is the MDR. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with that. We will simply call it from now on MDR. It's an extremely long document that covers a lot more than clinical investigations. It covers all the cycle, the life cycle of medical devices in Europe. And it's been effective since 2021, so it's not new. Okay, I have to apologize now because we have 3 slides with lists. I don't like lists, but that was unavoidable. So I thought it was useful for everyone just to have an idea of what the MDR articles include and the topics that they have. So the key elements for clinical investigations are in Chapter 6, Article 61 to 82. Annex 1, there's something, and the very important is Annex 15. What do they cover? So 61 is clinical evaluation. So it covers whether you should not do or whether you have to do a clinical study in order to achieve conformity or not. So it's very critical. It's slightly outside the focus of today's webinar because we are assuming that you're planning a clinical study here, a pre-market clinical study. Article 62, general requirements, it touches on legal representative, study design, investigator qualifications, and others. 63 is the informed consent, and it details the content of the informed consent and the process. Very useful. You don't need much more than that in order to draft a compliant informed consent for your study. Then we have 4 articles that cover studies involving vulnerable subjects. So incapacitated subjects, minors, pregnant women, or subjects in emergency situations. Again, they will be relevant and very useful in case that your study involves this populations. Insurance, Article 69, 70 and 71, it details the process through which competent authority review and assess applications for clinical investigations. So the timelines, etc. And I'll give more details later. Then we have Article 62, 72, 73, 77. It touches on EUDAMED. EUDAMED is the electronic system that will include several details of clinical studies when it becomes active. So there are certain modules that are already active and working, not so for clinical investigations. And so for the time being, this will be in place in the foreseeable future, but we do not know exactly when. So for now, EUDAMED is out of questions. Then it touches amendments and end of study reporting. 78, 79, coordinated assessment procedure. What is that? So in the, again, foreseeable future, multi-country studies in Europe will need to submit their protocols not to every competent authority in each country, as it is currently, but will be able to select one competent authority of the participating states, and it will be fine to have approval for one member states only. This is the good news. The bad news is that this is not yet in place. It's in a pilot phase now currently, and it will be mandatory from May 2027. Last slide with the list, but very important. It's Article 80, reporting of adverse events. This is very peculiar for Europe. It's different from what happens, for example, in the US. US have clearly different requirements. And given the importance of adverse events and expedited reporting of certain serious adverse events and device deficiencies, this is a very important article. Annex 1, device labels, instructions for use and packaging for pre-market studies, and then Annex 15, that's the core. Last one, but maybe first one to read, which are the documents to be submitted to the competent authority, and above all, detailed itemized contents, required contents of study protocols and of the investigator brochure, and other sponsor obligations. Okay, so for those of you that are not familiar with this document, if you're planning to run a pre-market study in Europe, but even a post-market one, honestly, we warmly suggest to buy it. Should be bought on the ISO.org website, which now maybe it's showing. So it's clinical investigation for medical devices, it's good clinical practices. Now, this document covers all study phases. It's the sister brother, how you want to call it, of ICH GCPs. They have very big similarities and quite a few but important differences. So ICH GCPs are not the same as ISO 14155. It's a FDA recognized standard. So if you're planning a study in Europe and the US, that's perfect document to use as a reference. And again, we will cover here just initiation of studies, but this document covers all phases from the planning to the conduct to the end, and covers the responsibilities of the various actors in the process that are sponsor, investigators, ethics committees, etc. So it's a very useful document for planning and for drafting your SOPs if you need to, or for updating them. And it does have very useful annexes. So it's not the typically regulatory burden type of document. It's very useful. It's being amended, so look for the update 2025. It's should be out quite soon. Okay, these are just a brief mention of the other pillars for the regulatory. So the Helsinki Declaration, it's always to be kept in mind. GDPR, we touched on it. The MDCG guidance, now they're divided by topic. So there's a dedicated topic on clinical investigations. 21 I checked the other day, and there are 21 guidance documents issued currently. Clearly, they're always evolving, so check on that. I have to say that not all of them are so useful or necessary. Sometimes they're kind of repeating what it's already contained in other documents, the MDR or ISO, but sometimes they are, because MDR does not give sufficient guidance. And then we have country-specific regulations, which add some burden, but the good thing is that they mainly affect the submission process and the sequence, the logistics, and maybe some additional documents that some countries ask for. So once that the study starts, there's a big harmonization. It's the end of the country-specific regulations. Okay, I'm trying to be reassuring. So snapshot summary, what to keep in mind. So something that it's quite often forgotten is that foreign companies without a legal place of business in Europe will need to appoint 2 representatives, can even be covered by the same institution or service company. So the legal representative, it's Article 62. of the MDR and the GDPR representative, so a local representative for all matters related to data protection. Don't forget, because that's going to be required by the competent authority. They're going to ask for the names and the address. Study documents, compliance with what we've said, MDR, Chapter 6, Annex 1, 15, GDPR, and country-specific regulations. Well, ethics committees, they refer to national law. Okay, so the core set of documents is established at European level. Ethics committees will work on a national level basis. And clearly local language is indeed required for certain documents. The informed consent for sure, but quite often the synopsis and potentially the instructions for use. You'll need approval by 2 institutions in each country. That's the competent authority and an ethics committee. You'll need to have site agreement signed before enrollment can start. And then don't forget about clinical SOPs developed or updated, because they are indeed checked. And we are exactly in these days seeing that with an inspection that it's happening in one of the countries that we deal with, namely Denmark. And they are gonna check out clinical SOPs from the sponsor. Okay. So I'll let Matteo talk about a very important topic, maybe the most important. So I'll stop sharing.
Okay. Thank you, Daniela, for your introductory part. So let me share my screen as well. All right. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar. I will be presenting a brief overview on site selection, and I hope that the information that I will be providing will be somehow useful for you in the future, should you decide to start a clinical investigation in Europe. Either it's pre-market or post-market. I mean, general concepts are more or less similar, but I mean, at the moment we are focusing on pre-market clinical investigations. So when you come to Europe for the study, the first question that we receive is, which country? Where do I go? So this is the main question that we receive, and we believe that honestly this is not the best approach to start selecting investigators. So unless you have a specific reason for choosing a specific country, the main focus and the main objective should be finding investigators, which will be good investigators. And to do that, you should have a very robust and reliable procedure to go through the selection. Why is that? Because investigators are the key element for the 2 main reasons for having the study successful. So first, enrollment, and second is data quality. So those are the 2 main elements that will drive your study to success. I wish to start by telling you some case studies that really happened to us, which drove the study into a true nightmare. So the first case was in proof of concept study, so pilot study, where we had an investigator that was supposed to be a close friend of the medical director of the company, so strongly suggested, who at the beginning enrolled quite steadily, so they went through a good pace of enrollment. But when it came to monitoring, we realized that more than 30% of the data were missing, and that there was an internal fight between study coordinators and investigators on who was responsible for what, and nobody was doing nothing. Bottom line is that at the end, we had to avoid data cleaning because of so many gaps, and have database lock with plenty of missing data. So this is one example of investigator who was chosen by the sponsor. Another interesting case that has just recently happened to us is for a pivotal study where we had an investigator who was strongly supported by the marketing department of the company. And so site selection was poorly done. And out of the 10 patients that he was supposed to enroll, he only enrolled one. And when he started to enter the data, he realized that this was too much work, too cumbersome, and he refused to continue entering the data at the point that we were forced to hire a dedicated study coordinator, so extra money for the sponsor. And even at the end, he refused to keep the investigator file at his location. So the sponsor had to find a dedicated warehouse where to store long-term the study documentation of that site. And similarly, another site for the same study in another country, in this case, the enrollment was not too bad, but we discovered during monitoring that source documentation was so poor that source data verification was almost impossible there, and we had to exclude half of the patients from the database because of missing supporting documentation. So as you can see, these stories are things that really happen and that you would never wish to occur in one of your studies. So what to do? Choosing good investigators, of course, will provide several benefits. So as we have already discussed, enrollment is the first one and data quality is the second. But there are also other aspects that are still similarly important. So a good site will use appropriately the device, and this will enhance subject safety. There are chances that the study will start early, and also the protocol will be followed carefully. And all of these aspects will translate at the end in having budget consistent with what was planned since the beginning. So where to start for selecting the investigator? So, of course, the first starting point, I think, is the internet. The web is a great source of information. So you can consult for public databases such as clinicaltrials.gov to see if there are similar studies. You can search also public databases for publications. There are also the professional societies that can be supportive in providing information of investigators, or you can meet in-person people during Congress or and so on. Let's say that the key aspect here is that for a successful study and for a successful identification of sites and investigators, a good starting point will be to have and identify a coordinating investigator who could be a true ambassador of your study by promoting it among the community of other investigators. So when this happens, other investigators that are contacted by your ambassador will be normally more motivated to run the study. So we believe that this is a good approach where to start. So differences between pilot studies, which are normally smaller in size, have a smaller sample size, require less patients, and a limited number of sites. First of all, because for a pilot study, you should try to limit all the variables. So usually 2-3 sites is a good option. We strongly suggest not to go with only one site. This is because, of course, if that site fails, then the entire study will crash. And as in those kind of studies, timelines are more compressed. We believe that it is very important to have investigators who have sufficient time to run the study and really be interested in the project. So this normally guarantees good results. We often have seen that selection of key opinion leaders has been strongly supported by sponsors, but in the end, this is not always the best choice. We had another recent case study where in a pilot study in cardiology, where we have an implantable device, class 3 implantable device, that the principal investigators felt that he was so expert in the matter that the protocol was not adequate, and he thought well to enroll patients by deliberately violating inclusion criteria that he found to be not relevant. So this somehow demonstrates that key opinion leaders is not always the best options to go. On the other hand, if we speak about pivotal studies where numbers are larger, in this case, of course, the enrollment is the key element. So the capacity of the site to provide the number of patients that are required for the study, and to have a dedicated team that is reliable and that can support the conduction of the study. Keep in mind that you should, in these cases where numbers are large, take into considerations that some sites may fail or may have problems. In that case, it's a very good, let's say, decision to add some backup investigators who can act exactly as a backup in case others fail. And when we move to larger studies, there is always the possibility that the marketing is keen in providing and suggesting names. So sometimes that could be fine, but in our experience, we have observed that most of the situations normally bring to a bad experience in that case. I'm not saying that you should not take into account marketing suggestions, but if that's the case, carefully assess the site to make sure that the team and the site will perform as expected. So why so many issues in clinic? I mean, in site selection and in studies. This is because normally this activity is really under considered poorly by most of the sponsor. They normally tend to save money in this kind of activity. And as normally now there is technology is helping us in doing remote visits. We have seen more and more sponsor going with the site selection by assessing the site through remote pre-study visits, which we believe is not the best. It's not the best options. And during the discussion, most of the times when you are discussing with key opinion leaders, we have seen that promises are accepted rather than assessing carefully the facts. Normally, as a rule of thumb, we divide by two what are the promises from an investigator. He says that he can enroll 10. We normally consider that 5 would be more or less the reality. And as I said, searching for big names is sometimes not the best, to go. And another important aspect is relative to the fact that many sponsors tend to do site selection by themselves, which is fine from a certain point of view, but having an independent opinion of professionals of the field, we believe can provide a value for a proper site selection. So what are the main aspects that we believe can help companies in selecting good investigators? First of all, will depend, of course, from the degree of innovation of your device. This will raise, investigators' interest, but also you can attract investigators by proposing involvement in the project at a more broader level. So if you're starting with a pilot, you may present what are your future plans for pivotal studies and try to engage and to involve investigators also in the, let's say, in the planning and in the development of the protocol. Another aspect that we feel is somehow important, because we have seen pretty often in clinical studies with medical devices that budget are quite low, especially if you compare them with studies with study drugs. Pharma companies may have a bigger budget, but even if money is not always the number one factor, we believe that proposing a fair budget surely helps. And last but not least is the possibility to have publications, though this can be somehow of interest in some of the investigators. So how to move forward? We strongly suggest to perform formal pre-study visits. So follow the standard and try to document in writing all the assessment. Critical is having in-person visit, as we have discussed previously. This is the best way to verify if the organization at the site is working properly, and what is the number of ongoing studies at the moment at each site. This is particularly important for key opinion leaders, where we know that in some circumstances they are more keen in accepting new studies just to have a bigger number to show to their colleagues. So take good care of assessing those aspects. and be very clear on what are the expectations regarding enrollment. As we said, normally they tend to promise exceptional enrollment, while at the end the reality is very, very different. And one of the aspects that we feel to, emphasize is really make sure that the protocol is read carefully. Normally, you just rely on receiving the protocol signature page as a demonstration that the protocol was read, which is not always the case. Honestly, we have seen so many sites that at the site initiation, when the CRA is presenting the inclusion-exclusion criteria, investigators jump and say, but with this criteria, half of our population is excluded. So this is one of the important aspects that I think that should be really taken care of. And as previously mentioned, I think that involving independent professionals brings added value to having an impartial evaluation of the site. So last comment, take-home message is that we strongly recommend to invest time and money for the site selection. So you will spend more at the beginning, but this at the end brings value, and in the long term you will save time and money, and you probably will have higher chances of success in the study. And yeah, was my last slide.
So while we're transitioning, I'm going to go ahead and start the poll question. If you would kindly take a moment to complete the poll, it should be appearing on your screen. And while that's going to run for about 1.5 2 minutes, while you have a chance to answer the questions, where are we going next? Daniela, are we back to you? I think you're muted.
Yes.
There we go.
Okay, here we go. Right. Submission pathway, what to do? I just checked quickly the questions. This is not Article 82 nor 74. For those familiar, this is just a procedure for conformity assessment studies that are done for conformity assessment, and that includes pilot studies according to Article 62. Okay, so 2 submissions at least. Ethics committee review is needed, and that's based on national law. Competent authorities established by the MDR. The blue box reminds you what I mentioned earlier, that the coordinated assessment procedure is not yet in place. So the process between ethics and competent authority can be parallel or sequential. That's really specific for each country. If it's parallel, usually it includes submission into an e-portal of documents, most often. So the authorities will talk to each other. You just submit everything and they will coordinate between themselves. That's the ideal thing, and that's usually faster. In other countries, it's sequential. So you submit to the ethics first, obtain approval, and then submit the whole package, including ethics committee approval, to the competent authority. Note that there may be, based on studies and type of studies and countries, additional approvals that may be needed at site level. This is a list of documents required per MDR Annex 15. It's the core set of documents for the competent authority submission. We start from this one because that's at European level, and that's common to all countries. Some countries are going to add some country-specific requirements. And once that you have this document set up, it will be easier because some of them will be requested also by the ethics committee. So quickly, clinical investigation plan is the study protocol. They renamed it, but it's the study protocol, the SIP. Investigator's brochure, informed consent, this summary of the benefit risk analysis. Note that per MDR only summary is needed, but there are some competent authority that request the whole risk analysis document. Instructions for use and sample labels, declaration of conformity with the GSPRs in Annex 1. Clinical evaluation plan, don't forget about it, this is needed. EC approval, I said ethics committee approval, it's required unless the submission happens in one single shot. Insurance certificate and the names of the two representatives that we've mentioned earlier, legal representative and GDPR representative. Country-specific documents, what are they? Well, I posted here some examples. For example, France, for this type of studies, they also request the PMCF, that stands for Post-Market Clinical Follow-up Plan. Italy, they ask for site qualification form that show site suitability to participate in that study. And they need to be signed by the head of each participating site according to certain requirements which are specific for Italy. And more countries are asking GCP certificate for investigators. And sometimes in Germany, they even ask specifically what the GCP course should be. It's not any GCP course, okay? Must have a minimum number of hours, so it's quite detailed. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm trying to, okay. So ethics committee submission, it's most of the documents requested by the competent authority, not all. And in addition, they will focus on site agreements. In most cases, they ask either for the draft of the site agreements or budget details about study-specific procedures compared to standard of care procedures. This may be requested by the ethics committee or by the administrative department to finalize site agreements. And then other documents as well. This is a representation of the timelines for the competent authority submission and the review and approval of the studies taken from the MDR. Now, outside of the details, the key things to note are two. One is that there are two phases. One is the validation phase. Is the first one. They check that the package is complete and there are no major gaps compared to what is needed. Otherwise, they come back to you and the diagram shows the timelines for each response, okay? Once that the validation is passed, they tell you clearly, and from that moment on, you enter the assessment phase. Now, what is important is that for lower classes of devices, according to the MDR, so class 1 non-invasive, class 2A and 2B devices, once the validation phase has passed and you have obtained an ethics committee approval, enrollment can start. Meaning that the competent authority will go on with the assessment and may come back to you at a later time point, in which case you're going to need to deal with that. But enrollment can start earlier. In the case of higher risk devices, After the validation phase, you need to wait for the assessment phase to be completed, so to have full approval by the competent authority and the ethics committee. Overall, what are the timelines? Ethics committee, 30-60 days plus exchange time with the sponsor. Competent authority, 125 days plus, again, the time with exchanging. The key elements here are the time for exchanging with the sponsor. So the delaying factor here, in addition to luck, because that's always present, it's also the quality of document that you submit, how accurate the documents were drafted, not only formal, I'm talking of the content, and now the regulations were respected. So what must be avoided is the ping pong with the authorities, especially if this is on substantial matters. They will come back to you maybe asking minor things, but that's easy to answer. Maybe there's a signature missing, or a date is wrong, or they want some additional documents, but that's going to be quite easy to fix. So all together, we estimate between 3 to 5 months in each country, if no major issues arise. Okay, and that's clearly, this is a inevitable difference, because there are simple studies, even if it's a first in man or a pre-market study, and there are very high risk studies, and this is why the timelines vary. Don't forget that you may need not only, you actually will need these two plus site agreement signed, plus any additional approval that may be required at site level. A few tips on site agreements. So the thing, several countries more and more, they have national templates. And you should stick to those templates. Don't try to change them. That's our recommendation. Sometimes they are really templates that you cannot change. Sometimes they are preferred templates. In both cases, we warmly recommend that you whip your legal advisor and ask them to be ready and to be fast in their review, rather than expecting that clinical sites do that for you on your changes, etc. Start the process early, practically in parallel. So the question should be, which documents do I need to submit for the ethics committee? Competent authority, okay. And what is the process for site agreements? Okay. Budget considerations, some notes. We have compared recent figures, and we've seen that, for example, compared to the US, investigators' fees are roughly 1.5, twofold lower than in the US. And that's the same for CROs. Based on our experience, the things that should be avoided: really study delay, because it impacts everything. It delays market access. So no one in your company is going to be happy. CEO, the marketing team, no one. That's for market access, but even cost for the clinical study will go up. Number of countries, yes, they do impact study cost more than sites. So unless you have a reason for choosing multiple countries, and remembering what Matteo said, that the focus should be on sites. So if you have a very good, 3 good sites in 3 different countries, go for it. I'm not saying that you should not do it because it's going to cost more, because what you spend more in submission costs, different countries, and having a local CRA, etc., it's going to be recuperated with data quality and enrollment. Okay, so the other issues are with data quality and missing data. Missing data that are collected but are not put in the CRF, for example, or protocol deviations, informed consent that are not signed, major protocol deviations, serious things. Another thing is major protocol amendments. Sometimes that's not really avoidable because the design of the product is ongoing while you're planning your study, but do your best to avoid that, because a major protocol amendment means a chain of changes throughout virtually all study documents with cost raising. Okay, common pitfalls, budget. Site selection, I think that the message went through strong. Spend money, they're long-term partners and key to success. Submission cost is definitely not the main budget driver. Multiple CROs for different countries can be a good idea, but you need to have in-house very strong project management skills and SOPs and control. Fixed price contracts driving CRO selection. We think that this is a mistake because when project change, and that's the first mention that I've done, when motivational visits were charged to the client, such as monitoring visits, where there was no patient being monitored. So be careful with that. Large EDC systems for small studies or with less than 100 patients, they are unjustified. And marketing people, they're very good in selling, but they will disappear once the operations start. And there is no reason for using, a Ferrari to buy milk. I'm quoting this thing that we say in Italy. Last slide, remember after first patient in, vigilance reporting requirements, Article 80, and there's one MDCG documents. You will monitor, collect data, clean, and these are normal GCP-driven activities. Remote monitoring, it's not always allowed. Access to electronic source data is more and more common in the US, is almost impossible in Europe. But remote monitoring through webcams, through alternative methods can be possible to be checked. Site invoices, you should think that they're often delayed, not raised automatically. And you need to draft 2 documents at study end as a minimum, final study report with all the results, and public summary for lay users. Public means that it will become public once the UDAMED is in place. And that's the end of it.
Amazing.
So we have 30 seconds for questions.
Okay, well, we'll try to follow up with the people on answers to their questions by email. Thank you everyone for your time today. Please complete the survey at the end, if you will. Help us understand. Again, if you have not received day 0 of the thing, please send me an email or a message or smoke signal or LinkedIn message or something like that, and we'll try to make sure that you get it. Spam filters are really a problem, but we hope that you get the 5-day email course, and persistence is key. I'd like to thank our speakers, Daniela and Matteo, for a wonderful job today. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who lent their time, and I hope to see you all on November the 7th for geez, I can't remember the name of it. It's mapping eStar to 62304. I don't remember the the IEC number, but at any rate, that'll be a lot of fun. So keep your eye out for that, and everybody have a great week. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you. Ready to take the next step? Join Donawa Lifescience's free 5-day email crash course and masterclass, a pre-market clinical studies in the EU, and 5 days. Registration link in the description. Join the free course.